Here we go. So now we're recording. So thank you for taking the time to attend the GR committee meeting today and tonight. So meeting objectives are, as you can see them, is basically to brief the GR committee on the most recent Manitoba Health meetings with the ADM and executive director, talk about the BR process. That'll probably be one of the main focuses in regards to what Manitoba Health has requested. Then also look at, kind of lay out a work process. I'm hoping Peter will log on shortly, Peter Marinik, to talk about what he's doing with the BR process task force and then how that's going to work with the GR committee. So basically, it's to get moving ahead with what needs to be done. So meeting agenda, we're just going to do a very short overview of what was discussed with the ADM and the executive director and a little bit of context. What does it mean? What happens next? Then we're going to focus in on the BR process and what Manitoba Health has requested. Then the other items are basically things that we're working on. One of the discussion points, and we'll come back to this one, is item number 3, as you can see on the screen, is Manitoba Health suggested that MOPA might want to consider putting in a financial request for funding for service delivery costs. Not labor, but costs. So we'll touch on that. I think I mentioned in the document that there's if it's not an onerous process or that they're going to drag this out, we don't think we should embark on that if it's going to be a waste of time and resources. Then obviously what the GR committee is going to do with the strategic planning exercises, they're going to start soon. And then basically for the excuse me, for those that are not on the board, there was proposed that the board and the GR committee have a joint meeting in October. A date hasn't been set, but we'll talk about that briefly. So why don't we, at the bottom of the document, I've listed out the same points that were the requests from the executive director. So we'll review that when we get to that point. And so why don't we just quickly go through, and I'll get Bram to provide his insights on some of this as well, is basically what we were told, and I'm going to just gloss over the ADM part and let Bram maybe talk to that first, and then we'll jump into the executive director. Did you want to try that, or do you want me to lead in?
No, I can fly at it. So I think everybody's had a chance to review the 2 documents with the ADM meeting on the 12th, and then we had a week later an executive director meeting. A little bit of a challenge with the ADM meeting was that there was a blackout in effect because there was a by-election in St. Boniface riding. So that was kind of 2 things it delayed things a little bit because we had actually a meeting with the executive director scheduled for a week and a half prior, but that got all mucked about. So because of that, the ADM, she goes, I can't really super specific about things, but her role, I think, anyways, was to talk more high level and how the transition, what was happening, and just as a whole about how the P&O program fit in with the whole KPMG report and a little bit to do with the audit that was done a few years ago of the program and things. And basically what she was talking about is that our pretty small. It only showed up in a couple spots in the KPMG, but really she was looking at the phases, and where we all fit in. And really what was evident is that some of the specific changes to or updates to regulation and things weren't going to really happen until phase 3 and moving onward. So essentially what they were looking at is the immediate effects were more looking at aligning to the transformation and how we fit into there. So it was pretty high level, but it still gave us sort of a perspective where we fit into it, that despite being a very small program, that we were definitely going to be part of the change, the alignment, and moving forward with that. Moving on to, I'm not going to read through this But we really wanted to get a good sense. But there was a lot of any specific questions that we had, because we had sent her a letter and things, and she couldn't really speak to any of the specific points, and had really touched on that. That was going to be touched on at the executive director meeting with Trish the following week. We asked some questions about commissioning and procurement and how we all fit in with that, and that was still a little bit of a gray area, because there's a lot of amalgamation going on, and what's the health authorities' responsibilities, what's going to be Manitoba Health responsibilities. So I think as how that pertains to what we do, it still needs to be worked out a little bit. But I think in general, we can be rest assured that status quo was not going to continue. So I don't know. We can speak to this, but I think everybody's read through this. I don't know if anybody has specific questions relating to the ADM report, and if Ray wants to jump in and add a few points to that.
I'll just add 2 points, and I've just brought the ADM meeting report on the screen. Probably just 2 things to add to yours, and then unless there's questions, we can move on. But basically how they're attacking it is in point 8, is they're looking at policy, how programs are administered. Procurement basically means how they're going to develop contracts or agreements with the providers, as well as spend money on specific procurement of services to fulfill the benefits of insured services, and then specifically how the department delivers those services. The other point she actually made it, she clarified at the very end, is that by the end of this wave 2, this year in December, she would have more information, and suggested that we set up a meeting with her in January of 2019, which is 5 months away. But basically, what she said, she would be able to provide much more details, as Bram has pointed out, to all the areas that we had asked questions in, because she was pretty upfront, and she said they're still working and developing this stuff, and it has to be approved by central government, the politicians, before they can move ahead. So whatever they work on and agree on, and the value is we can track this, because they have set up a website page where it basically provides monthly updates, as well as they've posted their roadmap and blueprint. So we actually know the timelines and what they're covering. But she did point out, as Bram indicated, that if you're looking for detailed specifics of what happens to the OMP program, you're not going to find it in the high-level document. It'll be more when we deal with Patricia Caetano, and they make the announcement to the OMP program, which is anticipated in the next few months. So basically, the ADM is open to meeting with us. That's the good thing. She basically said you'll receive more details from Patricia Caetano, which we did, as well as she encouraged continuing to sort of work with Manitoba Health to sort of see how the program was going to evolve and change. So that's, if we move from that area, if anyone has any questions regarding the ADM, we can address those. I notice one person has logged on.
Hi, it's Tom.
Sorry, who's that?
Tom, I just have a question. This document, what you've just shown us.
Yep.
Was that available to us?
Yeah, it's already in the GR committee area.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Ray, I just had another question. It sounds, when you're going, you can just see the one that I have on your screen right now. When they're talking about going through phase 3, and that's going to be like 2020, 2021. And
yeah, I'm just bringing that back. Yep.
Yeah, so that they're going through, and they kind of said, the department delivery, that seems like that's where they're going to be making the big change. We're going to be implementing them. Is that correct?
Yeah, mainly from a service delivery point, but she emphasized that between now and the end of the year, the department is going to actually say, which we're going to jump into, what specific changes will happen in the program, then how that will connect in with who they are working with and how they pay for it.
Yeah, because I was kind of getting I had 2 feels as I was reading through. One of this is going to be kind of 2021, and then I got the other one saying, like, we have to be prepared for a change in September for this BR stuff.
Correct. And what she did say, that this is an amazingly complex activity, and there's quite a bit of overlap depending on what piece of the plan you're involved in, because she said just because it says Wave 3 2021 and 2022 doesn't mean there's no activity happening within their discussions and their preparations for procurement, commissioning, and contracts.
So we should still be prepared for some sort of immediacy, and that's kind of why this was called now, eh?
Yeah, basically.
So sorry, Ray, I'll jump in.
Sure.
There's kind of two things that are happening there. There's one is they're looking at overall development and improvement and streamlining and all that portion. The part that is immediate, and that's why we called this immediately, was because there's certain things that are currently in the regulation, and there was an audit that was done about 3 years ago, an internal audit, and that noted that the regulation was not being followed in certain areas. And part of that realignment already started with NIHB being first payer. So these are all those things that they can immediately address. That next phase, so the phase 3 part, is actually the overall streamlining, innovate, like all that big picture stuff to see how do they, like they're going to define what the benefits are. But currently it's taking the existing program, just aligning it as closely as they can to to the policy and the regulation, and having to implement, because there was a lot of it was quite evident that they were not following the audit process at all. They were not following whatever guidelines they had as far as like the BR process needing to have prior approval. Like that stuff is already written in there for us, and they just needed that accountability was really lacking in the program. So that was an immediate need that had to be addressed. And so that's outside of the overall change and things. And that overall change phase 3, we don't have a good sense of what that is yet. But if we look at other jurisdictions, I think there's an indication of what that may be.
Okay, that's clear. Thanks.
Any other questions regarding ADM?
Nope.
Okay, so we'll move on, and we see that Peter Marinick has logged on. Can you say something to test your mic? Okay. And Casey's muted himself and has just stepped away to get something to eat. And somebody was logged. Sorry?
No, I'll just continue. They can.
Okay, they can check in once they're here. Go ahead, Bram.
So as far as the executive director, so that meeting was the following week. And essentially the big things there were, again, we had been hoping for a little bit more information. And right off the hop, she said, well, there hasn't been the announcement yet. The politicians haven't given the nod. So there's still a few things that we can't totally discuss. But what she did say, and that comes back to what I was just giving Nick clarification on, was that it was really aligning the current program to the current policy and or there's no policy, but the current regulation, and assuring that there's a lot of accountability there. So, so we went through those kind of things. So the audit was brought up, the BRs, and that was going to be a prior approval thing. And that was definitely, we expressed concern there. And she goes, well, if we have get a BR list that can be prior approved and goes to a post approval, and that's where really the urgency is. So, and that's something that we can help them out with. They also wanted some terminology that for us to be a little more descriptive in how we, like when we're fitting off the shelf devices and things, like what are things that we do to those devices to justify the certified rates and a certain fee being involved. So they're just looking to it's all about that accountability framework, having a very clear process in place to say, okay, if, for example, we're looking at the BR list that we're going to create here shortly, that Manitoba Health and Churches Department can say, okay, this is what was presented to us by the association. This is what's going to be on the list. And they have a paper trail that can follow. And so department themselves gets audited, not just us as facilities, because it works both ways, is that they will have a defensible process how they came up with this list, and that'll help with their accountability. So that's where they've asked for guidance and help on that. The audit process, they weren't clear on at all what that meant, but essentially we reiterated that it cannot be a punitive process, but that it would need to be like in the States and in BC, we've heard some horror stories where the auditors get a portion of the billings that are recouped and things, but it's more just as a matter of process that the device that's being billed for is actually what's being spent. If there's things like signatures, they're going to provide us a list. So, because I asked for a list just for us to beta test it, just to help them out, but they didn't have that in a format that they could quite share with us. There were a few other things they were talking about that the technical advisory committee meeting they were going to need some help with, and they were going to change that to a much more formal structure where it's there's that. The announcement of the changes that was supposedly imminent the week or so after, so we're still waiting on that to come, and we expect that any day now, but again, we've been waiting for that. I suspect that the cabinet shuffle that happened yesterday probably had some impact there because the health minister was changed, so I imagine that would be a nice welcome to the portfolio, dealing with any outfall of that, or follow to that. And then there was definitely the invitation or the extension where they wanted input from MOPA, and I was quite blunt in saying, like, what's the value in MOPA helping at this point? We've been a strand along for how many years? We've been working through this, providing a lot of information, and what's the value? And she goes, well, at the end of the day, she goes, we don't know what we're doing. We don't have a good idea. And she goes, if you want us to come up with it, we will, but it won't necessarily be right. And we have really a good chance, as I had mentioned in my post on Interact, is that we really do have a chance where we can affect change. And that was reiterated by both the executive director and the ADM, where they were just saying, like, now the government's behind us. So all those stall tactics and things when they promise us things that never happen. And again, it's the gut feel, and Ray and I agree upon that, is that it does seem like there's definitely change is going to happen. It's just a matter of to what degree, and we do have real opportunity for input. So I think it's promising. I don't for a second think it's going to be easy, but it's something that we are in the process. I think all the past 5+ years that we've been put in has definitely positioned us as being the source where they want to get the information, and they're starting with us. So I think overall it's positive. We'll have to wait and see what the entire fallout of the announcements are, but there are some things like the audits and things, and we've always been very supportive of that, because I think that is one area where we can show the professionalism of why do you have a certificate involved as opposed to another group, because they will be asking those questions, I'm sure. So we want to position ourselves in such a manner that we are the providers of choice there. So yeah, as far as that goes, everything else was self-explanatory. I don't know if Ray wants to add anything, or if anybody has any questions.
I think you've covered the key points. I think the big thing is that this was kind of a preview of what's coming, and she stressed that I'll give you the basics, but I can't go into the details. But she anticipated being able to, as the ADM mentioned, is that the full announcement regarding the ONP program will likely happen between now and the fall. And the moment that happens, that's when MOPA can fully engage with them to receive further details. because she's requested assistance right away with the BR process, that keeps us within the flow between now and September. So basically, we have the next call with her is going to be a screen sharing session, pretty much as what we're doing tonight, is on August 9th. So that's coming up really shortly. The focus of that one will be the BR process, but we can bring up any topic that we wish, and that's where tonight's discussion is really important, is to basically get the feedback and be able to indicate what some of the issues will be from their initial requests. Because Brom, right away when she said, you'll notice that you guys were saying, well, what's the hurry? Well, she says she wants to implement by September 1st. And we were quick to point out, well, that's a really, really short deadline, given it's the summer. And but she said that they're under pressure to start and to meet their own internal critical path dates. So it means that they're being held accountable at their end. We likely can push back and say, point out the deficiencies. And I think that's why it's important to provide MOPA's input. Because if we can say, if you start to accelerate this too quickly, there's going to be issues. So they can pass that on to the people that are pressuring them for, excuse me, an early September deadline. Then we can, I think that pretty much covers that we're waiting for the big delivery of the full announcement. And then she immediately went into the BR process, which is our next agenda item. Before we dive into that, is there any questions with what we shared so far?
No, we're good.
Okay, sounds good. So if I'm just going to roll this back, this is there again, you have this document as well. So you can download all these documents. They're in the GR committee area. Basically, they're under meeting reports that were posted recently for War Amps, NIHB, and a variety of other things. So basically, I'm just going to scroll to the bottom of the page with this is what's contained in the document we just looked at. So I've just copied it here, and I'll let Brom walk us through it. But in essence, she's asked for, as he's mentioned already, for three things. They need a glossary of terms, because what she stressed was that they need to establish some standards, and then a list of pre-manufactured devices so that they could create a post-approval list so that this doesn't tie up or bog down the system. And then obviously any recommendations that MOPA has with this whole process and reducing the number of BR codes. So that's, Brom, do you want to jump into this, and then we'll look at, well, how do we get all this together?
Yeah, sure. I don't think it takes much of a description, because I think we've had a fair bit of discussions already about it. But essentially, yeah, as far as the glossary of terms and adjustments, there was a bit of discussion around that, because it wasn't super clear what you wanted. But I think what it came down to is that at the end of the day, what they want is a list of terms or procedures that we as orthotists and prosthetists provide that's the value added, and how, if somebody who is processing a claim and they say, and I'm making this up that we had to heat the femoral section of a knee brace to accommodate for volume and lengthen straps due to same reason, and padded the medial tibial flare to reduce pressure on the tibial crest, or whichever. So that's how we would describe that. But what I'm thinking, like, we'd have to provide some mechanism or some way to say, okay, this is the value that an orthotist has added in this case. And so when somebody who is going through it, they check the box and say, okay, yep, this has been provided by an orthotist, and yeah, they've done something to it. So they're right now, I guess, trying to figure out, I guess, potentially what they will and won't cover, or whichever. But I think it's back to that accountability. So if a certified orthotist is providing this at one rate and the retailers are providing at another, what justifies the higher rate? And I think and that's an area where we've always been strong at, and I think we would all agree that at certain places we do provide the value, but now we're having to actually put it into a written format, not only for a justification side, but that somebody who's processing these claims can easily say, yep, and essentially, long story short, is that it's not bogged down and looked at and sits on somebody's desk and all those things, which sometimes can happen. So that's just spitballing there. As far as the pre-manufactured devices, so that's not only pre-manufactured, part of it would be the pre-manufactured, and that was more, I was thinking prosthetics there, but the orthotic side, there's a lot of procedures that we do that, given the archaic nature of our existing fee schedule and the fact that we haven't had a fee increase in, like the fees are 8 years old, that we've been really using this, the BRs as a mechanism to ensure that we're actually recouping our costs. So for example, in prosthetics, we're BRing some feet, we're BRing some prosthetic knees. And so that list, we want Manitoba Health to have, because a lot of that stuff sits underneath the BRs. And Chris was very clear that any BR needs to be prior approved. Which initially I was like, wow, that's a challenge. Like, how do you expect us to do that? Like, that's if we have 2 weeks or 6 weeks when we met, how are we going to be able to get that to you in that kind of timely fashion? And like, just going to bog down the whole system. Like, there's in just about every device that, well, not everyone, but there's a lot of devices that we do that do have a BR in them somewhere. So if you have one BR code in the submission, that's going to slow the whole thing down, right? And if we know that we have to work on a prior approval basis, that's going to delay initiation of care, let alone getting paid for these things. So I think that's where the urgency came in, is that we really want to try and get as far ahead on this pre-approved list that we can submit to Manitoba Health to look at. I think they will essentially, once MOPA goes through it, we come up with a standardized list, we send it to them. My feeling is they will just approve it. I don't know how they will. I don't think they have external consultants, and I don't think they have any way to really vet it. So I think as long as we're following the BR calculator and we're following the established kind of things that we've been doing to this point, I think there should be a fairly painless process. But in order to streamline this, we can't have that WinPose submissions look a little bit different than Snyder's, which different from Anderson Orthopedic. They all have to be very much the same. And that was part of what she was discussing, is that there is going to be a standardized BR process billing form or format that's going to be coming at some point. So those are things. And then also part of that list would be looking at things if we do like a specific kind of custom molded dorsal strap, or if we're doing anything that we do that's not specifically mentioned on but that's like common practice that we probably most of us BR anyways. I think we will want that to appear on the list, and that falls, orthotics would probably be more heavy on those kind of BRs, but still I can see both disciplines having that. So, and MOPA, we're looking at ways, because Manitoba Health was looking at the sheer volume of BRs that are coming in, and they're not very descriptive. So Paul Lamoureux, who's one of the policy analysts there, he's like, when we get a submission and it says 455 for a knee brace, and then we get another one that says 432 for knee brace, the spread there is so minimal, and it's really bogging them down, and they just know there's a small difference in dollar value, but there's really no description to what that is. So from an accountability standpoint, that's very challenging for them, and that's, from how much she stressed it, I think that was a big open or glaring area that the audit exposed that needed to be tightened up in short order. So I think that's where all that work that we did a few years ago on the BR process, I think that work is definitely now going to be helpful, but we'll have to come up with a shorter list, like of the immediate pressing things, get that list done. And then there was nothing stating that we could only do, this was a one-shot deal. but we can do submissions as we go. But I think we need to, as a group, prioritize what the most common things we do, come up with nomenclature, come up with pricing, and then we just all start being able to submit that. And then as new things come up, we'll have to use Interact or come up with some other mechanism within the committee that Peter's leading there or liaising on, and just coming up with something like standards. I think that's really critical, and that's what she wanted, something, because that'll streamline their end and streamline our end as well. So, the anticipated deadline was September 1, but I said what happened with NIHB, that was really 2 weeks notice was woefully inadequate. 6 weeks is marginally better, but still quite inadequate. And any time that she could give us to extend that is basically necessary. She goes, that deadline is out of her hands. I don't know how much it is or isn't, but essentially it looks like that's a fairly hard and fast deadline. So again, that's the urgency, and the sooner we can come up with a format and everybody's submitting their BRs for the group to look at and come up with at least an immediate list in short order, then we think we'll be in decent shape. But there will be some growing pains for sure. But I think once we come out the other side on this, as it will be with NIHB, is that we'll get a very good sense of where the deficiencies of our program are. And then once we get into phase 2 with the KPMG, we will have a lot of information that we can start to, how are we going to improve the program, make sure it's sustainable, what shouldn't be covered, those kind of things. So it's not going to be great, but I think the work is going to different areas for a few different projects. So I think I'll leave it there for now. If anybody has questions or anything like that, we can field those.
So how much of that are we gonna? What are we doing tonight, and what are we doing the next day or two? Like, are you as we meet this tonight? Do you want to kind of start working on that glossary of terms, or is that something you're going to want submissions from all of us, and then all of our top X amount of BRs are the ones that are most critical to our practice? Or
that's a good question.
I understand everything you said. It's just Kate, sounds good. What do we do? What do we do?
Right. So I think we need to, it's one thing to just start submitting stuff, and I think that is for sure the first part of it. But I think Peter has populated a working group, a committee to deal with the BRs.
Yep.
I think he has made some requests for information that go there, and I think that's that part of it. There's also going to be a framework, and I'm just looking here, and Ray can step in there. But how that's all going to go, what's expected as far as what's the format that we're going to submit them in, and come up with timelines and things, because I don't know if we have actually established timelines and things as far as how quickly that's going to happen, if there's meetings been set. I'm not currently sitting on that. I will obviously be a part of those meetings, but I think it's important that as a group that it's not something that I'll do the work for. I think there will be a prosthetics working group, an orthotics working group, and we'll all have to come to this together, and then it'll be something we present to the group. So I don't know if Peter's on the call, if he wants to weigh in on that a little bit, or if Ray has something to add to that. But yeah, stuff's going to happen. So this call right now is definitely not working on anything specific, but it's more formatting and just setting the next steps moving forward.
Yeah. Who's all involved in that in Pete's working group? I know I got stuff about it, but is that kind of everyone in the GR committee is also involved in that, or is there just a facility representation there?
If you go into the Interact, like Peter has, I don't know if that's gone totally live yet. Ray will.
Yes, it has.
It has. Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Ray.
I'm going to get, maybe Peter and I can sort of talk to this part. Let me just go there. Right now, there's nothing that's been decided. The workspace has been created. and has been populated with all the BR process materials. And Pete's done a great job to sort of lay out some of the initial steps of what need to be done. But we have to look, this new request from Manitoba Health is a little bit of a boomerang situation, because we were not going to engage with Manitoba Health this quickly. So I'm just going to that page now. So now, as Bram has just pointed out, they want specific things within this whole BR process. So that would be the message to the team, is to look at developing those things first. And I copied them in the workspace here. And if we have a look at the page, Pete could probably give us a bit of an overview. But in essence, we need to come up with, how do we get that information for the initial target date of September the 1st, which literally today's August the 2nd, so it gives us like 30 days to figure this stuff out. So the team members basically are representatives from orthotics and prosthetics from each facility. So there's quite a bit of crossover between the GR committee and the task force. I'm not sure which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Is it the task force that'll work with the GR committee, or is the GR committee work with the task force? Pete, do you want to jump in and sort of provide your insights at this point?
I think it's just easier for everybody to meet in person for this, and at that meeting, everyone's going to be asked to bring their list of BRs, and we're going to go through a systematic approach of how we're going to document, or how we're going to lay it out as far as description goes, how we're going to come up with pricing as far as, you know, shipping costs and all that kind of stuff, and we all have to agree upon it. And I think it's just going to be a lot easier to have an in-person meeting. And I don't think we need to have an in-person meeting for, you know, all prosthetics and orthotics together. Maybe a prosthetic meeting and an orthotic meeting, but sort of have, you know, ideas going back and forth. But we're going to have to work pretty quickly. And the reason why I say a separate meeting, because I think it's just going to be that much tougher to get everybody together at once. So
I like that, Pete.
Okay, so who's going to initiate that meeting?
Well, I guess we need to go. I can initiate it, but like, I'm going to be working on the prosthetics group for sure, and I know Eric from WinPo will be working with, like, as far as WinPo goes. I believe, well, Bram will be involved, but we'll get Gary involved with as far as WinPo goes, and I guess I can facilitate meetings, and I don't know about meeting space. We can meet at WinPo. That's not a problem, but I guess, what does everybody think about meeting space and meeting time? I'm thinking we're going to need about 3 to 4 hours.
Yep.
So, thoughts?
I'm good.
I think that sounds good, Pete.
Working out a date.
I guess maybe what I'll do is I'll send out, and if everybody is good with the Interact, I'll send out sort of dates for potential dates for meetings, or send out dates that you're not available, and Ray and I will come up with calculate sort of through all that best times that we can all get together and go from there. But I guess the thing is that we all have to participate in submitting our BRs and how we're currently doing it. And like, I know WinPo, we kind of, when we looked at it a couple of years ago, we kind of looked at the WinPo, like the way that we do it, because we were fairly organized with it, but we still want input from everybody. We don't want everybody riding our coattails, and we, like I say, input from everybody, and just full disclosure on how it has been done. And then we can talk about, maybe WinPo's not doing it the right way, and we just need to figure out the best way to do it. So.
Okay, so our first step is getting that meeting going.
Yeah.
Okay. And actually, you've crossed over it to once you have that meeting, you establish what the work process is. There'll be a request to, as you said, bring the materials, and then basically the group will work out whatever needs to be done. The information's there. It's just a matter of getting the team mobilized, basically, and then seeing how far you can take it. Or, like, even if the meeting determines that it's going to take more time than given, or what is a no-brainer? Maybe the descriptors, the glossaries first. Who knows? But that's what the meeting will be, is to determine where, what's going to happen. Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
I did have something in my mind, but I can't. I'll think of it. Just give me a second.
Sure, that's okay. We'll come back.
So
Yeah, I
I
was
think
going to
one
say,
of the-
even though we're going to meet for like 3 or 4 hours, I don't expect things to get done, but at least it'll give us the, it won't be finished. I mean, it will give us the sort of the framework on how we're going to, go ahead, and then we'll have sort of working groups in the background, and, working through, either through this space on the Interact, or even through email might be quicker, because I'm a little bit frustrated with the Interact, and I'm having a hard time navigating it. So just having, spreadsheets going back and forth, or Excel files or whatever. So,
well, I can assist with that. Basically, is once you get a little bit more comfortable with it, it's a matter of just uploading and letting everyone, I think the purpose of the workspace is everything's there. So everything lives under that roof. So once you post it, Peter, I think it's up to the team members to visit it, read it, and respond within that space.
Sure.
One thing I was just going to say is, all this, when we're working through it, we don't want to get super hung up on the super specifics on, does the body segment come first and then the device, because I have a feeling Manitoba Health is going to they're going to have their own formatting that they want for certain things. But I think the discussions we had a couple of years ago, I think that nomenclature that we had agreed on the formatting, I think that certainly works. The other thing I would suggest is, knowing that the time frame, the amount of time that's left, which is 4 weeks now, is for us to get something to them. And even if it's the top 20 codes or whatever, because I think the exercise that is useful, I would hate for us to go through however many codes that we need. We submit it to them, and they're like, oh, we want it in a different format. So I think what's critical, if we can come up with, in the very near future, coming up with top 20 codes, top 30, whatever is easy to get to, I think that's the most important, is my feeling. That glossary of terms is, while important, I think the biggest thing that's going to slow us down is that BR process, the BRs, because that is going to require that prior approval. And so anything we can get to them sooner than later is going to help. That glossary of terms, I feel, is still it's urgent, but that is something that once we get a little more information from them, we can start giving some thought, or what are some common things that we do? Flaring the top edge, that we're heat easing, that we're coming up with a lot of those things, and it's going to sound really basic. But I think that is what we have to do, because we keep forgetting that what we feel is really basic that's what most people can't do, or if they try to imitate, they just can't do it well. So I think if we're going to prioritize things, my recommendation would be get that BR list and get something in that first meeting that we're happy with, even if it's 10 items, it doesn't matter. But if we can submit that already and say, okay, and then we'll see what they do with it. Because right now, they made this request, and I'm not sure what they'll do with it. Well, I know what they'll do with it, but how they're going to deal with that information, and how many questions are we going to have, and what are they all going to do with that? So that would be my recommendation. Other than that, it's a huge task, but we want to ultimately keep that patients are getting what they need, the bills are getting paid, and that we're improving the program so that it is sustainable, and we're aligning ourselves with the KPMG and the audit that was done there. So.
Okay, those are good points.
So does anybody else have anything else they'd like to discuss? I know, Nick, you're all about just getting it done. Roll up the sleeves and go. I love it. But we just don't want to have any wasted time. But I think the next meeting would be a working meeting. So if there's any further discussion, questions, comments?
I just had a question about, I have a question about what they're asking with regard to what it is that we're doing in addition to off-the-shelf devices, for instance, that's setting us apart from retailers, if you will. If we aren't doing modifications to it, are they heading towards it's a retail rate, or so I'm just not sure. Is that a reasonable question? Like, what are they after? They're after why the BR is worthy of our attention, or what we're doing is worthy of being paid for. But what if we don't do anything to it?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And there was some discussion back and forth, and they were hesitant to wade too far into that discussion.
Okay.
But essentially, what they did need is that we need to be more descriptive in what we do. So I think it was twofold. One was it was a glossary of terms of what we do, and she was kind of vague about that, and we kind of pushed a few different ways, and I threw out some examples and was really trying to get at what you were getting at there, Dave. But I think the other part is that it comes back to, I think the two issues are linked, where we have the BR process. If we don't describe what we're doing well, so I think it's two sides. One is like what happens with the prefabs and anything like, or if we're doing, for example, an adjustment, and I'm kind of reading between the lines. If we do an adjustment and we say, well, we spent 1 hour, and we leave it very vague, or just clinical time, tech time, materials, and adjusted AFO to growth, we might need to add a little more description and say we lengthen the straps, right? And I think that's just, again, a justification. And if the department is audited, they can, yes, we have the information, this is a reasonable request, and it's in alignment with the accountability. So there's the two sides there, but what you're saying too is like, what are they planning on doing? Like Ontario, if we look at Ontario, they don't cover prefab or centrally fabricated.
Right.
I don't know if they're going to that. They've been seeming to align more to Alberta with anything that I've ever seen from them. So, and we've been kind of pushing them more in that way, just because it is, it has a copay, but it doesn't have the 25%. It seems to be a little bit of a better system, and they like to align with something. The ADP the rates are from 2006. It is quite old, so I think the Alberta kind of structure is a little bit better. It's got a better policy manual and things, but we're making sure to inject all the Manitoba Health, like what we've been doing moving forward and what we've been doing in the past. We don't want that to be lost, because we've had some discussions with clients who've done a lot of cross-jurisdictional scans, and they say ultimately, if the way that we provide care in Manitoba, if that's intact, because the barriers to patients are limited, the barriers for clinicians to provide the care is like it's pretty easy for us to provide care in the current structure. The problem is the materials aren't being paid for, the programs are kicked. So if some of those good things are left in place, then we can do that. So we've been really stressing too that they can't just take Alberta, they can't just take Ontario, but we've got to kind of come up with a made in Manitoba solution that is still in alignment with some of the other provinces. So that's part of where my thinking is. If they align with Ontario, well, then prefab and CFAB is out, right? Which would make a pretty big impact the way we do things, but not necessarily bad, right? Like, it just depends. Like, obviously we're pushing for that those things don't happen, but I think it just potentially changes the way that business and what is a certified orthoptist and prosthetist, what are they really geared to do?
Yeah.
It's probably
I don't know if
not
that's a
one
question at
thing,
all.
but all those items that you've covered, because they have to determine or they have to justify why they're paying for BRs. And if there's no description that's being submitted, and it's not necessarily just you guys, but in general, they have to say, well, what are you paying for? We don't know.
Yeah.
So it's
You also have
it's
to be able to
standards.
track it, right? But they have to track it too, because right now there's no way to track, like, how many knee braces? Well, they know they're fitting knee braces, but is that a sleeve? Is that structural? Or is it what's in between? So they get a better sense of usage. And then moving forward, if they see that there's a ton of BRs that are being done for, because that was brought up, is that there's a ton of BRs saying that it's device A is being fit by all the different facilities. Well, maybe it should come off the BR list and a code needs to be created for that. So that was part of it too, right? So that we can start creating a history of use for specific codes that can be put forward, and we can make an argument, or there can be a case made that this now needs an individual code.
Yeah.
So it's all interlinked, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. So, and they haven't totally been clear with us. So I can appreciate that there's a bit of people are a little bit lost and they don't have the total direction on it. I feel a bit the same way. But I think the BR work, she stressed to us that the BR, get that list to her, that regardless of what any announcements or anything, that was happening. So that was something she committed to pretty hard and fast to us, that is what needed to happen, because otherwise every BR is going to go through a pre-approval process and we can't proceed without. So there definitely was a lot of pressure on us if we want to make this to go smoothly, to get that done, which, fair or not, that was the reality, and she was pretty clear on that.
Any other questions?
This might not be that important right now, but when you talk about comparing to other provinces, anyone familiar with the changes that are about to happen in Alberta, and if that would change things?
Yeah, there's, well, and that's where it's helpful that we've had those discussions with the WARAMPs, because they're very good at the cross-jurisdictional scans and things. And there's actually a working committee right now that is trying to mitigate or affect some change, because really what's happened is they've cut down on the times on on a lot of the things. So for a repair that used to have 45 minutes, taking it to 15 minutes. So the overall code hasn't changed. Like maybe they got a little labor increase or whichever, but they cut down on the time that you're allowed to do, and the material increase and the labor got cut back. So they're taking a very device-centric approach there. But there is meetings ongoing with AADL and the association, and WARAMPS had the opportunity to sit in on those meetings. So yeah, we've certainly been apprised of a lot of the changes. If there's like anything that you've heard that you think specifically applies to us, we'd certainly be open to that, because we're obviously hearing this information kind of from the outside. So I would definitely welcome any input that you have, or because that anything we can get a heads up so we can prep us for if they throw that at us in a meeting. So
yeah, I don't know much for Pacific. Just by chance, a little bit over the last week, I ended up talking to a lot of friends, colleagues in Alberta, and they were all sharing some concern about changes they're about to be hit with, but they didn't have specifics.
yeah,
So I was wondering if maybe if they're trying, if Manitoba was looking at Alberta and Alberta's in the midst of a change, is that even just more uncertainty?
It is, and we've, like Ray and myself, like that's like WARAMPS helps with that, and just knowing what's going on. Is in Ontario, the Auditor General is looking at the program. In Alberta, they're looking. So what our pushback to a lot of those things is, while they can look at what's currently happening or some of the changes that are happening, overall, it looks like there's the pendulum starting to come back the other way, that the cost-cutting measures and just not looking at the program as looking more at the service space, that has to happen. And there's more and more lobby groups are coming online, and they're really advocating. So I'm hopeful that while they will say, well, this is what's happening in Alberta, they got a copay, they're cutting the labor, it's just devices. WARAMS is pushing back hard. They've had this documentation from the prosthetic side, that like living with amputation, and a few other ones that they've got, of saying, well, this isn't good care. Like, if you want to pay for care, this is how it should be provided. So we do have some pushback already on that. And my feeling is that there's going to be drastic changes, and there are things that are going to be cut from the program. Just with the way things are going, there's no doubt that that's going to happen. But we have right now, I think we can kind of provide our input on what those changes will be, and that will speak to a bit of the intent of the program too. And they have asked us, and they've kind of thrown out the chronic and acute. We asked them to define that, and they really haven't had a great definition yet. So they are trying to really narrow the scope of the program. So some of them saying, again, if we look at Alberta and Ontario, looking at anything less than 6 months, and those. So if they're looking at those kind of things, differentiating on those terms, we can certainly appreciate why they would go that way. But I think we can counter with certain exceptions, perhaps, or scenarios that they hadn't thought of because of the way that care is provided here in Manitoba. So we do have, I think it's a unique opportunity where we're at, but yes, there is a lot of, we do have to be very mindful of what's happening in other provinces. And the meetings, we have monthly meetings with the WARAMS that keep us up to date on some stuff. And then Ray and I obviously try and keep up to date on any changes that are happening in the other regions, like in ADP or ADL. I just, every now and then, looking at websites and things, and it hasn't been too much. Yeah, it's a good point, and we're certainly staying on it. But if anybody, I think what comes out of that is that if anybody hears something and there's a concern that's happening in another region, definitely pass that along to Ray and myself, because that is something that could dictate the conversation. And if anybody's going to OPC coming up here shortly, the conference, I'm sure that's an opportunity to talk to other people in other regions and see what their thoughts are, and just pick their brains on things and see what you can get. And then, because all that information helps Ray and myself when we're in having those discussions, that if we know more than they do, that always gives us a position of strength.
Sounds good.
Shall we move on? I guess silence means yes, I take it. Okay, so basically we've covered item 2, which is the request for assistance regarding the BR process. Item 3 was more just to sort of get your feelings on, and we'll ask that on the next call on August the 9th. But as mentioned earlier, what they're saying is, if we just recall what the ADM said, that the 3 waves, they're on wave 2 and wave 3, which this bleeds into, next year and the following year. What they were basically kind of hinting at was that there may be an opportunity before the new procurement process is installed and put into place, that if you put in a request for remuneration for service delivery costs, they might be able to come up with a solution or some funding for that. No promises. It was extremely vague. They brought it up, so it means there might be an opportunity. Bram and I discussed it and tried to probe a little bit further in regards to, well, how elaborate is the request and what do they need for that request? So we're going to pursue that on August the 9th, but we don't want that to take away time and energy from what's happening now with all the changes to the program. So any feedback from you guys would, we'll bring back whatever information we get, but this was put forward, for MOPA's consideration. If you don't want to, we won't. If you feel it's worth a shot, with the conditions of it not taking any time or resources away, then we should look at doing it.
You guys have a much better feel for it, I think, than we do. But if they brought it up, it sounds like there's some opportunity there.
I would agree that it's kind of interesting. Normally they would, you're reading it right, and that's kind of the read that we got is, why would they say put in a request? If there wasn't something that they had in mind. Keep in mind, they're always trying to look like they're doing the right thing as well as providing solutions. And we've written letters to the minister. We've written letters to them. And in the audit process that Bram mentioned, who knows, maybe the auditor said, well, what are you doing about this? And they haven't done anything. So this may be a way of being a win-win, a win for them and a win for MOPA, is that any increase to your material cost has value that, A, it's more money in your pocket, but it also brings up and solidifies your point completely that you're not being paid for the true cost of the goods you supply. And this is a way of them to actually move on that.
To me, it sounds like there's potential there, and maybe we'll know a little bit more of how much effort it would take to pursue once you've had your next meeting. Mm-hmm. So maybe just leave it as an option until then. But like I said, you guys understand the environment a lot more than I would, but at face value, that sounds like an opportunity.
Okay. Thank you for that. Does everyone feel the same?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, basically, it was meant to bring to your attention and to determine, how you felt about it. And as we've said, let's get some more information and bring it back to you guys.
I like that.
Okay. We can add any items to this agenda, but basically, this was an opportunity to basically do a recap of what's around the corner. So I've posted in the board space. I've moved on to agenda item number 4. I've posted in the board space so those of you on the board have seen it, is what is the association and GR committee strategic planning process going to entail and what's it going to look like. So basically, I can forward you the GR committee, the document that was used for the board briefing. I was waiting for the board minutes to come out. I haven't seen them yet, so I wasn't sure whether they had any specific direction or details. So there's nothing sensitive in this. It's just more informational. So I'll make sure I get that posted next. But basically, there's going to be 4 exercises that are meant to be sprint short exercises to get people's input, where you'll see a sample of the key things we're going to discuss at the session on September 18th. So that way you already have a sense of what we're trying to do with the strategic plan for vision, mission, goals, value proposition, the operational plan, and basically looking at what is unique to MOPA and what is the long-term view of what needs to happen with MOPA and the GR committee. You're going to split into 2 groups. The association board is going to work on the board side of the association, while the GR committee works on the GR committee specifically. What is the vision and mission for the GR initiative? Recognizing that 4 of the board members are on the GR committee. So we're going to make sure that there's overlap, that both groups are going to come together and share that. And at the end of it, you basically are going to have a strategic plan draft, as well as what is an operational plan of, okay, well, what do you want to do with the rest of the so-called 2018-2019 year. So basically, this was just a heads up to look and to participate. So there'll be 1 exercise every week starting August 13th till September 7th. and then basically the sessions on the 18th. So heads up, stuff is coming. Want your input, want your ideas and feedback on that. So any comments, questions on that?
I feel like I missed something in that. I remember when we were going through planning, looking at dates for availability on that calendar to see when we could do that planning session. But I think I missed something as far as those exercises.
Okay, well, they weren't announced until it was presented to the board last week.
Okay. So what are they? Not on the
So
board.
basically, it's I'm going to send you the document, and you'll see what it is. It's basically a simple exercise where you say, "What do you think the example, vision, and mission? What is the vision for the strategic? If you're on the board, it's going to be association related. If you're on the GR committee, what do you think the GR committee should be focusing on for the long term, other than specifics for this year? What's the big plan? What do you think it should be?"
They haven't happened yet. You haven't missed anything. It hasn't happened yet.
So we'll get those things. We'll work on. Okay, I think I get. I'll see it in the document from Ray. And if I got questions, I'll ask then.
Sure. Basically, this is to be posted. It has not been shared yet. This was just an advance notice of that's coming down the pipe.
Perfect. I went on vacation for 10 days. I missed everything.
No, you didn't. We waited for you.
Wonderful.
Okay, questions? Make sense?
I'm good.
Okay. So basically, last item, joint board and GR committee meeting. At the last board meeting, there was a suggestion that we have, just to facilitate both groups working together and understanding, and it would be after all the strategic planning work has been done, is to have a joint meeting at a yet to be determined date in October. So that's what's proposed. I just wanted to bring that to your attention so that you have an idea of sequence of events. We're basically going to be working on strategic planning from August to mid-September, and then October there's going to be a joint meeting. I'm also working with Brom on providing the framework for how the GR initiative can be, basically we're calling it the framework, as far as based on the review of how it'll be more about sharing information, getting input, regular meetings, and all that stuff. So you'll be seeing some material between then and now that basically outlines how that's going to happen. So the board was the first to get the information. Now it's going to trickle down to you guys. As I mentioned, it's only been presented to the board just at their last meeting. So until I get the meeting minutes, I was waiting to make adjustments to those documents. So you're getting stuff posted as it comes available. So you'll notice that there's been a lot of posting this week, and there will be a lot more material posted in the next little while. Oop, I've lost my screen. I hit the wrong button there. So basically, any questions on that? And as you can see, I have got lots of docs open here. Here we are. There we are. Back to this. So did anybody want to add any items? It's already almost 10 after 7. Generally what happens after discussions, we just clarify the next steps, which we've already started to do. Questions, comments? Does anybody want to add in anything? Brom?
Nope, I'm good. I think I said my piece, so I think
Okay.
people should be fairly clear on where I stand and where I think there are efforts.
Oh, well, one item that we might have slipped through is item number 3 here, is in our discussions with the Executive Director, Patricia Caetano, we suggested it and she agreed that once the announcement to changes to the ONP program are made, that she would be happy to meet with MOPA, the GR committee, whoever wants to attend a meeting where she could answer questions. So we said, we felt that was a good idea. So what you're seeing in the list of activities here is kind of a bit of a timeline for August till about end of September, early October. So so basically, we would likely look to set up a meeting with her where you guys could ask questions, the board and the GR committee, unless you guys don't think that's a good idea. So basically, first thing that we're doing is trying to get the MOPA recommendations assembled. Item 6 is what you came up with tonight, as Peter and you guys articulated. The first step is to get an in-person meeting to activate the task force and to find out where we stand so we can share some of that between now and September the 1st with Manitoba Health, whatever is possible. The next meeting with Manitoba Health is August 9th through screen sharing. Meeting with Patricia Caetano could happen between, let's say, September once the announcement's made. We've also discussed and likely will, depending on what we hear on August the 9th, consider an option to present a MOPA remuneration request for basically cost recovery, and then basically the steps to moving ahead with the BR process, which is the big concern. So that's kind of what's going to be happening in the next little bit. Information can be and will be posted through the GR discussion forums as well as the pages as you see, and you will be notified, and then you provide your comments as you've done in the past. So that kind of caps off everything we needed to cover tonight. If there's any questions or comments to that, we can answer those, and if not, we can sign off. And some of you are going to Costco, and what was cutting the lawn and other related duties.
I have to do my hair.
You have to do your hair, Peter? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll allow plenty of time for the perm to take effect. All righty. Are we done?
I think so.
Okay. Well, thank you, guys. So I'll post this document so that you can look at it. If you have got any questions about the other documents, so share that information, as well as this recording. I'm using it mainly for taking notes, but because who's 204-791-0017?
That's me.
Is that you, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I
basically,
couldn't get my microphone to work on my computer, so I had logged in on the phone too. So.
Okay, so basically, who we didn't get on the call tonight is Eric, Luke. Matt notified me by text that he wasn't going to be able to make it, and Dan the same. So basically, we'll share this recording so that they can have access to it. I will likely post it within Interact or put it in a Dropbox folder. So that's it for tonight, folks. I thank you for your time and your comment and your feedback. Bram, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think we're good. I'm just looking forward to actually moving forward on these things, and yeah, I think we're kind of at a spot where I think things are happening.
Yeah, I think so. Well, have a good evening, folks.
You too.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.